everybody. Give me a second here. Now, listen, I'm sorry. I'm a little medicated because I just cut up two great big long pork loins and my hands are very tired. Um, these are the wrong glasses for talking to you folks. Now, listen, somebody asked me to read from this book. Now, I will read some. I can't read from this book because the copyright is way too soon. Okay. And also,
way too soon.
Oops, excuse me. Also, oh shoot, where's my chat? Okay, hang on. Pop out this. Top chat, live chat. Okay, this book is actually a history. It's not a novel, and there's hundreds of footnotes. Okay, but I am going to tell you how, without reading the entire thing because it's a back and forth between lawyers and everything, but this is how this original autobiography ended up being children's books. All right? And then we'll go on to read chapter 2. So I am going to shut the chat off. You can still chat. I'm just not going to see it. I suppose I should have left my... I'm just going to put it on participants. Okay? So... there was some this book itself was rejected, and her daughter Rose Wilder Lane wrote to the guys who something about the contract. She says, "My mother does not know what to do, and I dare not advise her because I know nothing whatever of the juvenile field." But she added, "My mother is telegraphing you to hold up the contract until I have time to make a few inquiries about the possibility about the possibility of selling it elsewhere. So much depends not upon the quality of the book per se, but upon the personal tastes of the heads of juvenile departments." We now know today, folks, that Laura Ingalls books, or she's been taken off of some book standard for juvenile award for juvenile books because of her mother's the mentioning in the books of her mother's hate for Native people. And I say that's bullshit because it was, pardon my language, I say that was wrong because it was true for the time, right? If you so anyway, Wilder, however, was not too scared to try submitting the manuscript elsewhere. On November 7th, I think this is in like 35 or something, 1930s. Where is this? 1931. Okay. On November 7th, she and Lane airmailed her manuscript to Lane's old friend, Ernestine Evans, who oversaw children's publications at Lippincott. Meanwhile, Fiery herself had quietly contacted a children's book editor at Harper's and given her the manuscript. During this crisis, because we're talking like this is, the Depression, right? During this crisis, neither Lane nor Wilder appeared to consider a more aggressive marketing approach for the adult version of Pioneer Girl, this book. The focus was entirely on the children's manuscript. Lane continued to write letters during early November, perhaps on her mother's behalf, and the month dragged on. Lane was bothered and worried by her teeth. On the 9th, then she wrote in bold pencil with a double underline, "Palmer, income stopped." Although her parents had invested in Palmer and Company too, Lane decided to delay telling them that the firm had failed. So everybody was affected by the Depression. And authors back then, nobody's putting money during the Great Depression on buying books. You know what I mean? So it's a really risky business to get into for any publisher. Yet Palmer's failure made finding a new home for the little house in the woods even more important. Then on Thanksgiving Day, November 26th, Marion Fiery wired with the news that the Harper and brothers had decided to buy Wilder's manuscript. Wilder then telegraphed Knopf direct and withdrew the little house in the woods. Lane wrote to Bry with instructions that any contracts from Harper's that appeared satisfactory to you will suit us. She even directed him to sign on the contract on Wilder's behalf. Both Lane and her mother wanted to get the book into publication as quickly as possible. Virginia Kirkus, who directed the children's division at Harper and Brothers, wrote Wilder on December 8th confirming the sale. I am notifying by today that we are accepting your manuscript Little House in the Woods. By mailed Wilder 3 copies of the contract for her signature the next day. Clearly, he thought it wise for her to see the contract herself before she committed to work with Harper and Brothers. Unlike Knopf, Harper offered Wilder a contract for only 1 book, but the publication process moved quickly once Wilder had signed. By December 15th, Kirkus was requesting photographs for the illustrator, and shortly thereafter made one last change to the title, which became Little House in the Big Woods. On April 6, 1932, the book was published and debuted as a Junior Literary Guild selection. That's the company that has taken Laura Ingalls Wilder off their list. If I'm not mistaken, please check. At some point in late 1931 or early 32, Wilder had started to work on another manuscript for children, perhaps initially encouraged by the 3-book offer from Knopf. In March, she showed it to Lane, who began editing it on March 6, 1932. Its working title was Farmer Boy. Now, folks, Farmer Boy is actually book 2, and I thought it was book 3. So after Little House in the Big Woods, it will not be Little House on the Prairie. It will be Farmer Boy, okay? So on to chapter 2. There's a little back history for you. So chapter 2, Little House in the Big Woods. Winter days and winter nights. The first snow came, and the bitter cold. Every morning, Pa took his gun and his traps and was gone all day in the big woods, setting the small traps for muskrats and mink along the creeks, the middle-sized traps for foxes and wolves in the woods. He set out the big bear traps, hoping to get a fat bear before they all went into their dens for the winter. One morning he came back, took the horses and sled, and hurried away again. He had shot a bear. Laura and Mary jumped up and down and clapped their hands. They were so glad. Mary shouted, "I want the drumstick! I want the drumstick!" Mary did not know how big a bear's drumstick was. When Pa came back, he had both a bear and a pig in the wagon. He had been going through the woods with a big bear trap in his hands and the gun on his shoulder when he walked around a big pine tree covered with snow, and the bear was behind the tree. The bear had just killed the pig and was picking it up to eat it. Pa said the bear was standing up on its hind legs, holding the pig in its paws, just as though they were hands. Pa shot the bear. There was no way of knowing where the pig came from, nor whose pig it was. So I just brought home the bacon. Oops, I'm really sorry about that, folks. I didn't see that happen. It's this. Let's do it. Let's try this. Jumpins, I'm so sorry. I will look for a tripod later for this. Sorry about that. Where was I? So I just brought home the bacon. Pa said. There was plenty of fresh meat to last for a long time. The days and nights were so cold that the pork in a box and the bear meat hanging in the little shed outside the back door were solidly frozen and did not thaw. When Ma wanted fresh meat for dinner, Pa took the axe and cut off a chunk of frozen bear meat or pork. But the sausage balls or the salt pork or the smoked hams and the venison Ma could get for herself from the shed or the attic. The snow kept coming till it was drifted and banked against the house. In the mornings, the window panes were covered with frost and beautiful pictures of trees and flowers and fairies. Ma said that Jack Frost came in the night and made the pictures while everyone was asleep. Laura thought that Jack Frost was a little man all snowy white, wearing a glittering white pointed cap and soft white knee boots made of deerskin. His coat was white and his mittens were white, and he did not carry a gun on his back, but in his hands he had shining sharp tools with which he had carved the pictures. Mary and Laura were allowed to take Ma's thimble and make pretty patterns of circles in the frost on the glass, but they never spoiled the pictures that Jack Frost had made in the night. When they put their mouths close to the pane and blew their breaths on it, the white frost melted and ran in drops down the glass. Then they could see the drifts of snow outdoors and the great trees standing bare and black, making thin blue shadows on the white snow. Laura and Mary helped Ma with the work. Every morning there were dishes to wipe. Mary wiped more of them than Laura because she was bigger, but Laura always wiped carefully her own little plate and cup and plate. By the time the dishes were all wiped and set away, the trundle bed was aired. Then, standing on each side, Laura and Mary straightened the covers, tucking them in well at the foot and the sides, plumped up the pillows and put them in place. Then Ma pushed the trundle bed into its place under the big bed. After this was done, Ma began the work that belonged to that day. Each day had its own proper work, Ma used to say. Wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, churn on Thursday, clean on Friday, bake on Saturday, rest on Sunday. Laura liked the churning and the baking days best of all the week. In winter, the cream was not yellow as it was in summer, and summer butter churned from it was white and not so pretty. Ma liked everything on her table to be pretty, so in the wintertime, she colored the butter. After she had put the cream in the tall crockery churn and set it near the stove to warm, she washed and scraped a long orange-colored carrot. Then she grated it on the bottom of the old leaky tin pan that Pa had punched full of nail holes for her. Ma rubbed the carrot across the roughness until she had rubbed it all through the holes. And when she lifted up the pan, there was a soft, juicy mound of grated carrot. She put this in a little pan of milk on the stove, and when the milk was hot, she poured the milk and the carrot into a cloth bag. Then she squeezed the bright yellow milk into the churn, where it colored all the cream. Now the butter would be yellow. Laura and Mary were allowed to eat the carrot after the milk had been squeezed out. Mary thought she ought to have a larger share because she was older, and Laura said she should have it because she was littler. But Ma said they must divide it evenly. It was very good. When the cream was ready, Ma scalded the long wooden churn dash, put it in the churn, and dropped the wooden churn cover over it. The churn cover had a little round hole in the middle, and Ma pushed the dash up and down through the hole. She churned for a long time. Mary could sometimes churn while Ma rested, but the dash was too heavy for Laura. At first, the splashes of cream showed thick and smooth around the little hole. After a long time, they began to look grainy. Then Ma churned more slowly, and on the dash there began to appear tiny grains of yellow butter. When Ma took off the churn cover, There was the butter in a golden lump drowning in the buttermilk. Then Ma took out the lump with a wooden paddle and into a wooden bowl, and she washed it many times in cold water, turning it over and over and working it with the paddle until the water ran clear. After that, she salted it. Now came the best part of the churning. Ma molded the butter. On the loose bottom of the wooden butter mold was carved the picture of a strawberry with 2 strawberry leaves. With the paddle, Ma packed the butter tightly into the mold until it was full. Then she churned it upside down over a plate and pushed on the handle of the loose bottom. The little firm pat of golden butter came out, with the strawberry and its leaves molded on the top. Laura and Mary watched breathless, one on each side of Ma, while the little golden butter pats, each with its strawberry on top, dropped onto the plate as Ma put all the butter through the mold. Then Ma gave them each a drink of good fresh buttermilk. On Saturdays, when Ma made the bread, they each had a piece of dough to make into a little loaf. They might have a bit of cookie dough, too, to make little cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her patty pan. You know what, folks? I am really sorry. Let's try that. How about that? Sorry about that. They might have a bit of cookie dough, too, to make little cookies, and once Laura even made a pie in her patty pan. After the day's work was done, Ma sometimes cut paper dolls for them. She cut the dolls out of stiff white paper and drew the faces with a pencil. Then from bits of colored paper, she cut dresses and hats, ribbons and laces, so that Laura and Mary could dress their dolls beautifully. But the best time of all was at night when Pa came home. He would come in from his tramping through the snowy woods with icicles hanging on the ends of his mustaches. He would hang his gun on the wall over the door, throw off his fur cap and coat and mittens, and call, "Where's my little half pint of sweet cider, half drunk up?" That was Laura because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run to climb on his knees and sit there while he warmed himself by the fire. He would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go out and do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. Excuse me. Sometimes when Pa had walked his trap lines quickly because the traps were empty, or when he had got some game sooner than usual, he would come home early. Then he would have time to play with Laura and Mary. One game they loved was called Mad Dog. Can you see this? Pa would run his fingers through his thick brown hair, standing it all up on end. Then he dropped on all fours. Growling, he chased Laura and Mary all around the room, trying to get them cornered where they couldn't get away. They were quick at dodging and running, but once he caught them against the wood box behind the stove. They couldn't get past Pa, and there was no other way out. Then Pa growled so terribly, "Arrgh!" His hair was so wild and his eyes so fierce that it all seemed real. Mary was so frightened that she could not move. But as Pa came nearer, Laura screamed, and with a wild leap and a scramble, she went over the wood box, dragging Mary with her. And at once there was no Mad Dog at all. There was only Pa standing there with his blue eyes shining, looking at Laura. "Well," he said to her, "you're only a little half pint of cider, half drunk up, but by jinks, you're as strong as a little French horse." "You shouldn't frighten the children so, Charles," said Ma. "Look how big their eyes are." Pa looked, and then he took down his fiddle and he began to play and sing. "Yankee Doodle went to town, he wore his striped trousies. He swore he couldn't see the town, there was so many houses." Mary and Laura forgot all about the Mad Dog. And there he saw some great big guns, big as a log of maple. And every time he turned them round, it took 2 yoke of cattle. And every time they fired them off, it took a horn of powder. It made a noise like Father's gun, only a nation louder. Pa was keeping time with his foot, and Laura clapped her hands to the music when he sang, "And I'll sing Yankee Doodle Doo." Yankee Doodle-dee-doo, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle-dee-doo, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle. All alone in the big woods, and the snow and the cold, the little log house was warm, snug, and cozy. Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura and baby Carrie were comfortable and happy there, especially at night. Then the fire was shining on the hearth. The cold and dark and the wild beasts were all shut out, and Jack the brindle bulldog and Black Susan the cat lay blinking at the flames in the fireplace. Ma sat in her rocking chair, sewing by the light of the lamp on the table. The lamp was bright and shiny. There was salt in the bottom of its glass bowl with the kerosene to keep the kerosene from exploding, and there were bits of red flannel among the salt to make it pretty. It was pretty. Laura loved to look at the lamp, with its glass chimney so clean and sparkling, its yellow flame burning so steadily, and its bowl of clear kerosene colored red by bits of flannel. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace, flickering and changing all the time, burning red, burning yellow, red, and sometimes green above the logs, and hovering blue over the golden and ruby coals. And then Pa told stories. When Laura and Mary begged him for a story, he would take them on in his knees and tickle their faces with his long whiskers until they laughed aloud. His eyes were blue and merry. One night, Pa looked at Black Susan stretching herself before the fire and running her claws out and in, and he said, "Do you know that a panther is a cat? A great big wild cat?" "No," said Laura. "Well, it is," said Pa. "Just imagine Black Susan bigger than Jack and fiercer than Jack when he growls. Then she would be just like a panther." He settled Laura and Mary more comfortably on his knees, and he said, "I'll tell you about your grandpa and the panther." "Your grandpa?" Laura asked. "No, Laura, your grandpa, my father." "Oh," said Laura, and she wriggled closer against Pa's arm. She knew her grandpa. He lived far away in the big woods, in a big log house. And Pa began. "Do you want me to go on and read the panther story?" I'm going to ask. Yes, I'm going to finish it. You know why? It's only a few pages. Okay? The story of Grandpa and the panther. Your grandpa went to town one day and was late starting home. It was dark when he came riding his horse through the big woods, so dark that he could hardly see the road. And when he heard a panther scream, he was frightened, for he had no gun. "How does a panther scream?" Laura asked. "Like a woman," said Pa, "like this." Then he screamed so loud that Laura and Mary shivered with terror. Ma jumped in her chair and said, "Mercy, Charles." But Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. The horse with Grandpa on him ran fast, for it was frightened too, but it could not get away from the panther. The panther followed through the dark woods. It was a hungry panther, and it came fast as the horse could run. It screamed now on one side of the road, now on the other side, and it was always close behind. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to run faster. The horse was running as fast as it could possibly run, and still the panther screamed close behind. Then Grandpa caught a glimpse of it, and as it leaped from treetop to treetop, almost overhead, it was a huge black panther, leaping through the air like Black Susan leaping on a mouse. It was many, many times bigger than Black Susan. It was so big that if it leaped on Grandpa, it could kill him with its enormous slashing claws and its long, sharp teeth. Grandpa on his horse was running away from it just as a mouse runs from a cat. The panther did not scream anymore. Grandpa did not see it anymore, but he knew it was coming, leaping after him in the dark woods behind him. The horse ran with all its might. At last, the horse ran up to Grandpa's house. Grandpa saw the panther springing. Grandpa jumped off the horse again against the door. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him. The panther landed on the horse's back just where Grandpa had been. The horse screamed terribly and ran. He was running away into the woods with the panther riding on his back and ripping his back with its claws. But Grandpa grabbed his gun from the wall and got to the window just in time to shoot the panther dead. Grandpa said he would never again go into the big woods without his gun. When Pa told this story, Laura and Mary shivered and snuggled closer to him. They were safe and snug on his knees, with his strong arms around them. They liked to be there before the warm fire, with Black Susan purring on the hearth and good dog Jack stretched out beside her. When they heard a wolf howl, Jack's head lifted and the hairs rose stiff along his back. But Laura and Mary listened to that lonely sound in the dark and the cold of the big woods, and they were not afraid. They were cozy and comfortable in their little house made of logs, with the snow drifted around it and the wind crying because it could not get in by the fire. Oh, now, let's see if I can't fix this a little bit better. Oh, I tell you, folks, I can turn this off. And that way, when I tip it back, it won't get you in the face. All right, let me turn my chat on here. Change my glasses. Wow, there's 47 people here. How's it going? How's it going? All right. So, Little House in the Big Woods was the first book. Farmer Boy was the second. What was there in there? Oh, you notice how whenever Ma did chores, even when they're too little to actually really do anything, she includes them in teaching them how to make bread, how to make cookies, how to make butter. You know, she encourages them to watch and to do their. And did you also notice that they let the beds air? That is something a lot of people don't do. And it's actually, I heard this from David Suzuki. He's a renowned Canadian geneticist. And he, because not necessarily of bed bugs, but because of what are they called, dust mites and stuff. If you leave the bed open, he always leaves his bed open. He rolls his bedding down to leave the bottom sheet, and then he fluffs the pillows. He said because they'll stay longer in the bed and they will thrive because the heat will be trapped in. So you roll your bedding back, let them air for a couple of hours in the cold, and boom, Bob's your uncle. They stay fresher. Magic Mike at automated moderator is on, so no typing in all caps or using multiple emojis or he will get mad and give you a timeout. Absolutely. Hi, Doris, how are you? I wish I could teach like Ma. Well, honey, just teach your kids. Include them, right? I mean, my boys know how to cook. I mean, Briar can get quite lazy and just, grab pizzas. But even still, he'll do things like he'll buy, bread wraps and spinach and chicken and stuff like that. And he'll just, he always makes sure he has like a vegetable and fruit in his diet on a daily basis, right? I was late and playing catch up. The crafty preschooler. So excited for this. Hi. Yeah, absolutely. So I actually really am looking forward to having grandchildren. I hope Arthur and Mel are listening to this, right? Soon, okay, before I can't do this anymore. But you know what's really cool is they'll have a copy of it, won't they? As long as YouTube continues, I guess. Beth Trojanowski. My mom said you were on. I'm Christina, her daughter. Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for this reading. I really enjoy listening while I'm cooking supper. Did you enjoy the first little bit of history I gave you on Little House in the Big Woods? Between now and Saturday next week, I will actually look more and see if there's any more tidbits that I'm going to just highlight and bring them up before we read the next chapter. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I want, the difference between her autobiography and these books is huge. There's all kinds of stuff that they left out, because they became children's novels. And there's a lot of people that assume that these books are a true accounting of her life, her growing up. While they're based on her life, there's a lot of facts that have been changed and dates moved around so that they were more children friendly. A lot of stuff got left out. Stuff about characters. I mean, Nellie Olson's name wasn't even Nellie Olson. So I think she blended two characters, two people into one character, Nellie Olson. Yes, I'm talking of Pioneer Girl, the actual autobiography that I have read. Well, I haven't read all the boring stuff, but there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And I've marked it so that before next week, I will go through these footnotes and see if there's anything more, about Little House in the Big Woods. Maybe the Panther story is just a story. I don't know. We'll see. How many of you have this book? I want to buy it. You can get it on Amazon. You cannot get it on Kindle. And I'm going to tell you why. I used to get so pissed off when I couldn't get it on Kindle. Pardon my language. I used to get ticked off when I couldn't get it on Kindle because I didn't realize that there is so many photographs. I mean, look, this here and this entire page here, this is all footnotes. And that is Samuel O. Masters. Whoever that is, we don't know. I mean, there's people that lived with them throughout the long winter. Did you know that? The hard winter? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we are led to believe in the books that are just not true. I mean, they cleaned up a lot of Paul's character. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a fun fact. Charles Ingalls and I share a birthday. There you go. Not same year, obviously. I thought the windows back then were oilcloth and not glass. Oh no, glass windows came in the 16th. Howie, when did we start getting glass windows in the world? Glass in windows. 1600s? You know what? I'm going to Google that. Let me just... Original glass... origin of the first glass window panes. Get some history here. Oh, I'm wrong. I'm completely wrong. 13th century BC. That means 1300 years before Jesus, they had glass for windows. So there you go. They only use the oilcloth. Wrong thing to hit F11 on. They only used the oilcloth because glass was so difficult. Hang on a second. I'm screwing up here things here. Um, because glass was expensive. Okay, it doesn't mean they didn't have it. It just meant they're expensive. We look at panes. Who buys a pane of glass anymore? We buy whole windows. They go and pop them in and out, right? But you think about that. If you remember in the first chapter, their bedroom window was just a wooden shutter. You imagine how bloody cold that would get? So, yeah. But glass windows were yeah, exactly, very expensive. I'd never read these, but enjoyed them on your channel. Well, thank you. So, do we have any other questions? Never knew the history was there. Well, there are some people who think these are totally fiction. There are some people think that they're totally fact, when the truth is they are fiction based on fact. Based on fact. That means things were, artistically changed to make them child friendly. So, yeah, exactly. Cool. There are no named surveyors in Pioneer Girl or the Little House books, but the Ingalls and Wilders knew one survey well. Samuel O. Masters, civil engineer in Redwood County, Minnesota. Okay, thank you, Dallas. There you go. So he was, I see, I just opened that and showed you. But okay, so he was a surveyor. I need to get a copy of the set and of Pioneer Girl. Oh God, yeah, read it with your kids, but read the autobiography first. I got stuck with the watching Little House on the Prairie. Then I found a book, and I think it was Little Town on the Prairie I read or something. And then I realized there were books missing. And then I think I was an adult when I actually sat down and read the entire series. Like when I say adult, I mean like 18, How old was Laura when they moved to the woods? I think she was about 2. Because originally, we'll find out. Because when we get to Little House on the Prairie after Farmer Boy, okay, when we get to Little House on the Prairie, you're going to find out where they mixed fact with fiction. Most of the events that took place in that book actually happened, but when Laura was a baby, like less than 2 years old. And then they moved to Minnesota and went back to Indian country. Or to Indian territory. Does that make sense? So I believe they were asked to leave after the Trail of Tears thing. Or they left, right? And then decided to go back later when the kids were a little bit older because it was now open, but he was on the wrong side of the line of the cat where it was open. So, I mean, they blended 2 events, I do believe, but don't quote me because I haven't got that. We're not there yet, right? You know what? I hated history in school too, right? But I mean, I'm a reader, right? I love to read. I'm actually reading. What am I reading right now? Shores of Silver Lake. I just read them to keep me company as my medication kicks in so I can go to bed. 1871. No, I don't think it does take place. 1871. I don't know. I'll have to look. My favorite HS teacher was Mr. Robinson. The way he taught American history, I was all ears. My Aunt Grace also had him and also loved the guy. Little House on the Prairie show was my fave when I was a kid. Oh my God, my dad used to tease me horrible. What's Charlie gonna cry about today? I was like, Dad, and he goes, Bev, he said, none of that's real. And I said, so? I'm enjoying it. But when I started reading the books, the children's books left, my bun's coming out. The children's books left holes in my heart, so to speak. So I bought this. I didn't get this autobiography until like 2 years ago, and I've been like chewing my way through it every once in a while, and I'll pull it back. It's to me, it's like a manual, right? I'm no expert by any means, but when it comes to these books, I can almost quote them in my sleep. But it's really nice to fill in the gaps with history. Yeah, Dad, don't spoil. Who's Dad? Who's Dad? Well, the thing is too is I when I finish this, I think I've still got the rest of the Anna Green Gables books to finish. So that's another reason I've had to put my life on a schedule so that I could do this and still work. Like, I've got a quilt to finish, and I've got another book, just another couple of books to read, pre-record, right? So, oh, I know. Well, the problem was is we only got two channels, which was 12 and 27, Global and Czechs, which Czechs was a local Peterborough station, and Global, and we had to put an aerial on top of the rock over the highway to get those two channels because we were behind a hill, kind of like we are here. Maybe that's why I feel comfortable in the hills, probably. And so, like Gilligan's Island and Little House on the Prairie were pretty much the only two shows that, I got to watch. And the only good show that Dad would watch with me was, well, there was two of them, Barney Miller and Mork and Mindy, when they came out. God, am I dating myself, eh? Yeah, I'm working through the Anna Green Gables, but this new book, the Windy Poplars, the chapters are like a half an hour long. So if I get two out a week, I'll be doing good, right? Can you believe I've never even watched Little House? It's not worth watching. They get the number of children correct. They get all the names correct. They even drop a few, Plum Creek and Walnut Grove and stuff. I don't think I've found Walnut Grove in here at all. Um, and they kind of mash it all together and make it all happen in one place with all these characters that are in the books, but they actually are not I mean, a couple of stories like when they bought Ma the stove. Okay, well, no, it wasn't a Christmas present. No, they didn't have Christmas trees. Christmas trees didn't become popular, real like pine trees coming into the house and being decorated didn't really become a thing until Queen Victoria in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? Because it was her husband, who was a German, who brought the bringing in the tree, the entire tree. And so that's where we get it from, is from Queen Victoria's husband. That's where we get our Christmas trees from. Unless your family is German to begin with. Like those lines go back too, right? I want to make history fun, but I still need to learn it to teach it. So get the autobiography and then read the books with your kids, knowing the truth. And maybe you can be more informative and they'll be left less wanting like the rest of us. You know what I mean? Walnut Grove is in Minnesota. It was changed names, Walnut Grove, Minnesota, to Brainerd, Minnesota. Yeah, but I've never even heard of it in here. Because when they went to town, it was Pepin. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's probably Peepin. Peepin, but because it's Pepin, so it should be a hard E, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Pepin. And that's the only town, and then they leave, right? Remember, they go to town twice. Once to buy stuff. Well, it's coming. So, Civil War was 1861 to 1865. Okay, right. Thank you, Sue. I click on the little commercial dots at the beginning of a show, then go back to the beginning of it, then no commercials. I cheat, but it works. Okay. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed day 2 of Little House in the Big Woods and sharing a bit of history. And I will spend time this week looking for some more historical tidbits surrounding this book to share with you before we read chapter 3, Wednesday, 5 o'clock. Not Wednesday. What am I talking about? Saturday, 5 o'clock. Not Wednesday. No. Saturday at 5 o'clock. And remember, folks who are from the Connected Hearts, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 o'clock is our new live stream schedule. All right. This is Mrs. Wolfe from Reading with Beverly Wolfe saying, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I hope to see you back next week. Take care. Same time, same days, 5 o'clock, Saturday, Sundays, Eastern Daylight Time. I love you guys. I'm really enjoying this, and I hope you are too.